Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing 25.16 mid lane Tierlist. So, draw content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There are a couple of changes for mid lane this patch. In fact, it was probably one of the roles with the least amount of movement. Outside of the likes of Kiana being buffed, Morgana being buffed, Brand being buffed, there wasn't actually any direct nerfs. The main kind of thing for mid lane was Viego. They wanted to kind of allow Viego to be able to lane again. It's not doing that great at the moment. It's still early days, obviously, because people are like figuring out what builds they want to play, whether it's like Kraken, crit variants, bruiser variants, Bork, Trinity, stuff like that, seeing what really works on the champion. And I think as time goes on, when it's got more refined player base, I could definitely see it getting a bit better, but right now it's not putting out the best results in solo queue. But anyway, let's get into the tier list. So the D-tier is going to lead off with Varus. The most notable thing about Varus is the difference between like the first items, what you can go on him. So he had the changes this patch, which kind of amplified his on-hit variation, was nerfing down his lethality variation. Mid lane doesn't really go lethality, it's mostly like a Nasher variant when you're playing him mid. However, both Hexplate and Ginsu perform decently on Varus mid. I honestly probably say, like, there's a high chance Varus, if you build like one of these other items instead of the like defaulting on the Nashers, it's actually maybe a B tier mid laner. But AP Varus hasn't been good for a while now, ever since there was a while back where like AP Varus top was really dominating. It was like this really degenerate play pattern of just like stacking getting 3 stacks of Blight, hitting the target with one of your spells and then ulting, doing it again, and you could like one rotation tanks, for example, doing like 10,000 damage or something. That was like absurd clips out there. It's not that at the moment. They nerfed it quite egregiously, and I wouldn't really recommend playing AP Varus unless it's like a very specific game for it with like very high HP pools, which can't really optimize into MR as easily. Hexplate Varus though, both top and mid, honestly, looks pretty solid as an option, so definitely something to consider there. The other picks within the D tier are a little more, or a little less flexible. Honestly, like Sworder, for example, I think in the right matchups can be a fine mid laner, and honestly, if you get the right compositions, there are spots where he works. He's been a pretty stable, like, not popular mid laner, but a mid option who is there for a while now. I don't think the other two in Corki and Tristana are as good, albeit they are still picks which kind of linger in elite and competitive a bit more, because if you like CS well, get access to a lot of gold on these champions, they can still be quite effective options. But for like the average player, I would probably just recommend avoiding these champions altogether, unless you're very comfortable on them, or you know the specific matchups you want to take into them. So for the C tier then, I'm going to lead off with Viego. So the Viego isn't actually putting out that amazing results at the moment. I kind of read wrong. Like, I thought he would be better than he currently is, but obviously there are like caveats to that, such as, yeah, it's early on to the patch, or not early on to the patch, but like it's relatively fresh pick. That combined with people are figuring out the builds, what they want to go. I've seen like different variations of like Bork performing well. I've seen Trinities do alright, albeit you sometimes look as if you're lacking a decent chunk of damage when you go down the bruiser route with like the Trinity Sundered. There have been different keystones, PTA, Conqueror, Grasp even, as like options you can go. But right now, I'm not going to recommend him, because I think we'll have to see kind of where he lands in 25.17, but as like a pick right now, kind of lingers in the C tier, just not that recommendable in his current state. Gassadin's on the weak side. Fortunately, he's being buffed in 25.17. In counter matchups, I still think you can get value out of a champion at the moment, and I think going into 25.17, he'll be a little more legitimate counter. But yeah, Blind Gassadin, not that good of a champion, and can definitely struggle into some of the more popular picks. Gangplank. Always the funny thing whenever I look at data for Gangplank is AP Gangplank, albeit doesn't put as good numbers out as AD Gangplank, is playable. And I mean, Solo Baku has obviously proved that you can very much make it work all the way up to Challenger. I believe he's played it, but he is like the best Gangplank in the West, which does help in that regard. But it's put out relatively solid numbers for only really having an ultimate on his ult outside of like obviously the W one, which is a bit like, I mean, it's real and fake at the same time. But yeah, the ultimate is the real like powerhouse of that, and you do still go Trinity first. It's not like a Malignance or a Lichbane start, because it just isn't that great. But like Trinity into Malignance into like Leandria, I believe he goes third. does work sometimes. So definitely something to kind of like discuss when it comes to the champion, as there is a good pick if you put a lot of time into him, but he requires, like, he's one of the highest mastery mid laners in the game. Like, you have to have loads and loads of practice on the pick, otherwise he will just be outperformed by other AP options in the mid lane. Not only that, but he is, I mean, obviously he's elite skewed, that kind of comes in with the other thing, but he also does rely on, like, certain things which you're going to get access to more in comp. Like, he wants to play on objectives, he wants, like, peel and control, and those things aren't as valuable in solo queue because people just won't respect them or won't play around them as much, so he definitely also does suffer in that regard. But as a pick, he's definitely better at the moment, and I do have him as a C tier. He's not like a D tier, I wouldn't even like consider him. He's more of a C tier. If you put a lot of time into him, he can be rewarding. Outside of that, though, I wouldn't recommend him. Yone sits within the C tier. He has been on the weaker side for a while now. He's honestly like a low C tier pick. For average solo queue, he's been pretty underwhelming. Like, I would recommend Yasuo almost every day of the week over Yone. Just puts up better numbers, is traditionally just stronger for most of the game as well. Yone works a bit better in competitive as like the AD mid laner, like as a facilitator for AP junglers. I believe he's like still prime, like the number one option in that regard. But outside of that, yeah, he just doesn't really like perform that well. Mel, I'm going to leave within the C tier. Mel is also another champion which could be bumped up to the beta as long as people just start maxing E. Like, I don't think the pick is bad by any means, but people skill it wrong, and because it's for majority of people, it does obviously have an effect on its placement. If you do Emax, I honestly think, yeah, she's a high B, even A tier option at the moment. Rice sits within the C tier. He's not like, he's like a low B, high C. You could honestly have him in both tiers and like it's fine. I don't think Rice is a bad champion. He has good setup, but you have to execute the combos correctly, and I think it can just be easier to get more consistent results out of other mid laners in the pool at the moment. Moving up from the C tier to the B tier, then there is 3 champions, and that is Qiyana, who got a sizable buff this patch and is definitely performing a lot better at the moment. I still don't really recommend her for like more casual audience, I guess you could say, or people who aren't willing to put as much time into champion. But if you're very comfortable in Qiyana, she's back on the menu as a good option. I genuinely think you should probably put time into her now, and yeah, she can be like a good AD mid laner within your pool. The other 2 are Morgana and Brand. They both received relatively not particularly big buffs this patch. They like the buffs were more focused for jungle in regard to both of them. But Morgana is receiving a really big buff next patch. Like, the mana cost on W is going from, I believe it is 70 to 130 at the moment, to 70 to 110, which is huge. It just allows you to cast the ability more often. Like, Morgana mid has legitimate mana problems, and being able to have access to her ability a bit more, combined with the fact that they are also buffing the like minimum damage on that ability, very legitimate option. Like, I would honestly put time into Morgana like this patch in preparation for next patch, because I don't even think it is bad in its current state. And yeah, Brand is doing better. He received a buff towards his Q and a buff towards his ultimate for mid lane. The other buff was like a jungle modifier buff, which doesn't matter as much here. But being able to CC targets for longer just gives him more utility, gives him more power, and the ult being out more often gives him a bit more damage. So yeah, legitimate buff. Bumps him from the C to the B tier. I still don't think he's that amazing of an option. Like, I'd honestly have him towards the low end of the B tier, but he's not a troll. I mean, he wasn't a troll pick before, but he wasn't a good pick before. Now I'd say he's he's there as an option if you do want to like play him. Ari's been performing quite badly for a while now. I have her towards the low end of the B tier. Like, I don't really recommend her. I think her damage is a bit on the low side, and this kind of comes as a result of her like competitive dominance. She's still played in competitive, and you're probably like when you're playing her in solo queue more leaning back towards the Malignance build, because one of the reasons why she was so strong in the past was like that Roa Liandry variation, which just isn't that great anymore. They nerfed those items, and they nerfed her like kind of the reason why she wanted a bit more. Like, they took away some of her base damage and gave it back through ratio, so you value having more AP within the kit. Right now, I don't really recommend her as an option. Kind of have her in like the low B tier area. Twitch, I think AP Twitch mid is a genuine option. Like, if you're comfortable with Twitch's playstyle, I would consider it as a pick. The way the like Waveclay works for true damage, for roaming, it's all very unique to Twitch in a way. And I mean, there's a couple of champions which like kind of fall into like the similar archetypes, but Twitch, I think, is one of the few champions which has a bit of all of it. So yeah, genuinely consider him as an option. I think AP Twitch is like a legitimate pick when you play mid lane. So make sure you're going like PTA and not like Halo Blades, because it does perform considerably worse. Garen's been underwhelming for a while now. Like, I have him as a low beta option, and albeit they buffed Phantom Dancer and him a couple patches ago, he's not that performant in mid lane, and honestly I think his player base is like definitely sunk a bit. They wanted to move him away from like his burst orientated builds. He's still going them, so that hasn't been as successful. As a result of that, he has just lost damage. So yeah, he sits as a beta option at the moment. Malphite, I think if you can get him as a counter pick, he's a fine option here. And if you want a bit more agency, Malignant's Malphite can be a pretty solid option. That being said, though, I mean, he's a counter pick, so that does prohibit him from being like quite as high, unless he's like an overpowered counter pick. But I think right now he's not quite that. Like, he's a lower agency champion. But when you are playing him as a counter pick, when you're going like the armor tank build, you are just like lower agency as a pick. AP Malphite has high agency, but you also, then it's just not as good. So like it's a bit awkward in that regard. Have him as a beta champion. He's obviously very easy to play, so I think if you can find the right spots, then yeah, you can get value out of the champion. Lissandra sits in the beta. She's an alright counter pick. She's been kind of an alright counter pick for a while now. Not the greatest, but not terrible. Tilia is also, I mean, Tilia and Ari have definitely suffered from competitive. Like, Tilia received a pretty solid nerf back along, and albeit Tilia mid is traditionally quite a good option, even in solo queue, she's really not performing that well at the moment, so I am going to drop her towards the lower end of the B tier. Ace has been gradually on the rise. I don't think he's suddenly like an amazing mid laner. Like, he has a pretty clear weakness, and he really suffers into a lot of assassins, and assassins traditionally are a lot more popular in solo queue. So he does have that as a limitation, and like with his buffs back along also like hurt him, because Fizz is one of his worst, if not just outright his worst matchup in the mid lane. So that is also something to be considered when you're playing this champion. Can just be awkward in that regard. He sits as like a mid to high beta option. The main struggle with ASO is he's just low agency early on into the game, and I like recommending picks which have some strength early on into the game, and they can scale. Like, I don't think scaling picks are bad, and especially in solo queue, honestly, scaling picks are quite good. It's like Vega, for example. I mean, I'd just like take most scaling champions perform well in solo queue, like Kale, but I don't think ASO is I mean, nasal scaling is incredible, obviously, but he does really, really struggle at certain points in the game, and he really struggles into certain archetypes. So I think it's about finding where you can play him and where he works. Twisted Fate, I'm going to drop towards the lower end of the beta as well. I don't like recommending him as much anymore, ever since the nerfs to his, ever since the buffs and then the nerfs, which basically removed almost the entire impact of the buffs. He's definitely like more of a low beta option now. He's not the highest agency. Well, I mean, he's got different agency, because I think his agency can be used in another effect. He doesn't have agency through damage, his agency through map control, which can also be quite effective if you use it like well. So I think it's about understanding macro, and if you can do that, then yeah, I think he can still be a good option, but definitely not quite as recommendable as like a high or mid B tier pick at the moment. Zed sits within the B tier. I think if you can pilot him well, and honestly, like a lot of the AD assassins here, like your Talons, I'm going to actually put Kiana with this bunch now, because I always had Kiana with the C tier. I can now finally put her with the B tier assassins. And then it's like Akshan, LeBlanc, like if you could, and even Katarina. Actually, I'll put them all together, because they're all in the B tier at the moment. I think if you can play any of these picks well, they can still be really effective options. If you can't play them, they take a lot of time to learn. Like, these champions are time sinks, and if you don't enjoy the assassin playstyle, I don't think you need to learn any of them. And honestly, my always recommended like learn assassin is going to be Akali. I think Akali is probably one of the more flexible of the options. I think like LeBlanc, for example, can be a bit more flexible when she is very strong, but Akali probably curves a bit better than some of these picks. I think more of these picks here you have to just like outright OTP, but Akali you can just put time into her and then figure out what matchups you want to play her in, and I think she is like, yeah, the most flexible, or maybe most forgiving out of the options here. Cassiopeia, definitely on the weaker side at the moment. I have her in the B tier because I think she just struggles into a lot of the like options at the moment. And honestly, with the buff towards to Horizon Focus next patch, which helps some of the ranged mid laners, I think she will continue to get worse. So I'm honestly going to put her towards the like mid to low end of the B tier at the moment. Like, outside of like the Ryzen Silas matchup, I just don't really recommend her as much. And even in like the highest level of play, obviously that doesn't mirror like solo queue, she doesn't perform that well like into the Ryze matchup. Like, it is a good one, but it's not like crushing like quite as maybe well as it had been in the past. Gregor sits within the beta. I think he's a fine option. He's a pretty OTP driven. Like, if you're not a Gregor's OTP, you probably won't play him mid lane. But I think as an AP champion, he's pretty solid at the moment. So I will have him in the B tier in his current state. Maybe like around here, for example. Aurora sits within the B tier. I think she's a fine option. Like, she's a bit elite skewed in her current state, which kind of prohibits her from reaching the A and S tier for like more average elos. But if you can pilot her well, I think she can be a really, really powerful champion within your arsenal. So definitely sits towards the high end of the B tier at the moment. Silas, I think if you can effectively use him as a counter pick, can be a great champion. But it's kind of reliant on being a counter pick again, and that is probably the healthiest, like the healthier way Silas can play. The fact that he's also a viable flex pick at the moment, it does help him. So honestly, maybe he's like a low A now. Like, Jungle Silas has taken some level of burden away from mid lane Silas. So actually, I'll bump him up because he was top of B tier. Vel'Koz sits within the B tier. He'll benefit from Horizon Focus being buffed next patch, so definitely something to be aware of. I still do recommend Xerath over him, but Vel'Koz is still a very legitimate option and definitely sits towards the high end of the B tier at the moment. Cho'Gath has kind of fallen away as of recent, as like the AP kind of like Shrevelia version in mid lane. Well, I say recently, like, it's been kind of like a trend over time. Like, Shrevelia just isn't that good of an item, and Cho'Gath's definitely suffered from that. Like, if they buff Shrevelia, AP Cho'Gath mid will probably be like back to a maybe even an S tier option, but he definitely suffers from building not a very good item. Jace, I've managed to miss. I've just noticed I have him in the C tier at the moment. He's a very hard to pilot champion. I think in mid lane he's a bit easier to pilot than top lane Jace. Like, a top lane Jace, you need to be like a Zeus, for example, to really get the like full value out of that champion. I'm basically just like saying you gotta be like a Grandmaster Challenger level player to like really pilot the pick well. In mid lane, I think he's a bit more forgiving. I think you can just pilot him well, and you can usually get value out of the champion, especially if you're playing like the phase rush lethality build. He can just outright one shots at like targets, and that can just be the way you play him here. So honestly, maybe he's like a low B tier, but I do have him in the C tier at the moment because I don't like recommending a champ knowing that like if you just play it mediocrely, it's probably just not that good of an option, and I'd recommend like other AD champions over him at the moment. Moving on to the A tier then, we're going to lead off with Sion. Well, I mean, I have Silas here, but we're going to have Sion as well now. Sion was in the B tier, but they buffed him this patch. Honestly, surprisingly, because Sion was not a bad option, and especially in competitive, like, he was already like the #1 blind tank option there. And yeah, the buffs helped blind tank Sion. They obviously focus more around buffing up AD Sion, although AD Sion is still not good. Like, I still wouldn't recommend it. Tank Sion has more agency, is better in mid lane, moves up to the A tier. Definitely something I would recommend. If you just like stonewalling, like, I think Sion can be a really good way of fixing your composition as well, as well as an option. And yeah, just making sure the enemy mid can't really get ahead. Sion can be great for that. Zoe sits within the A tier, low A tier option. She got nerfed more recently, and that did affect her, but she was kind of like hidden OP for a while, and when they buffed her and when they realized that like she should just, oh no, the item system got better for her, and then I believe, yeah, that's why they kind of nerfed her. But she's still a good option. I still think if you're very comfortable playing Zoe, you will continue to play her because she will still be a good pick for you. Aurelia, don't play this champion unless you're an OTP, or not an OTP, or, I mean, kind of an OTP. Like, you have to be really good at Aurelia. Like, she is probably the most early game skewed champion at the moment, or like one item kind of like two item champion. Like, you need to be ahead on this pick. If you're not ahead and you don't pilot it well, it will fall off a cliff. Like, it will be terrible later on in the game. Like, Aurelia is not a good mid to late game champion. She really struggles in that regard, and if a game goes past 20 minutes a lot of the time as Aurelia, you will actually just feel yourself diminishing with the game. Like, it is quite egregious the way this champion is skewed at the moment, which is why basically I don't recommend it unless you're very, very, very comfortable piloting it. So yeah, that's kind of like my rant on Aurelia. Quinn is going to benefit from Profane Hydra being buffed really aggressively next patch, and once again, Quinn mid isn't bad. Like, I think if you're comfortable playing Quinn mid, it's like one of your AD options. Be aware that like the buffs next patch are genuinely massive for her, and she'll probably end up getting nerfed in 25.18. But yeah, she's not a terrible option as of the moment, so also just something to be aware of. Ziggs, I'm actually going to drop him towards the top of the B tier. He did get buffed, and the buffs were really good for him, but he doesn't put out as good numbers as like I would like for an A tier champion, so I'm going to drop him towards the B tier. I still think as an artillery pick, he can be good, but he's not my premier option. Like, my premier option is Xerath, and I will continue to recommend Xerath over him. Like, they're close, but yeah, I think Xerath really takes it as like the top one. Fizz, I think, as a counter pick assassin is really good. Maybe he should be a B tier option because I think he is limited by the fact that you need to have mastery on him, and the fact that he's probably a bit more counter pick skewed, but the buffs are really good, so I'm going to leave him like, I'll have him as towards the low end of the A tier at the moment. Vex, also kind of like a counter pick option at the moment. I have her in the low end of the A tier. I think if you can pilot the pick really well, she can be effective. She serves the Vex mains well, and I don't know if they're gonna, but I mean that's what was stated out of like one of the because on Twitter I can't remember, it was an interaction between two people. It was an interaction between Froxon and someone else, I believe it was, with like a Vex main, and like he was saying like how they're comfortable with like where Vex is as a champion as being like the LeBlanc counter when in competitive, but then outside of competitive she's like good into just a lot of the top pool in the mid lane, and that is kind of where she's at the moment, and I like her as an option there, so she serves her player base well and kind of what she wants to do as a champion, and I have her in the A tier. Anivia sits within the A tier. Honestly, like a low A tier option. Like Anivia mid really isn't spitting out the numbers she has been in the past. I believe she's kind of suffered from Archangels and Roa being nerfed, so sits as more like a low A tier option at the moment. Honestly, kind of suffers from some of the same issues Cassiopeia has with like free itemization, just getting weaker for her and getting better for some of the champions around her. Nico sits as a pretty good mid lane option. She's obviously very, very niche at this point in the mid lane. Like, she primarily comes in as like a support option. But if you can play Nico mid and you understand how to like use the W, how to kind of bully people out in laning phase, I think she still is a very solid A tier option. Veigar sits within my A tier. He's only really good in this elo bracket. Like high elo Veigar really doesn't put out that good numbers. I believe there are like only one or two high elo Veigar mains. I think it's the who's the rich gang mid laner? Is it Peng? I think it's Peng, and then obviously Veigar V2, which are like the two kind of like high elo Veigar players. There might be more. I think Salazar was like a ADC one, but like anyway, I'm kind of getting off track. But he's not that common in the high elo. Doesn't perform that well, so I don't really recommend him as an option for like kind of if you're going higher up. But if you just want to play a champion in this elo bracket and climb within this like mid elo bracket, like gold to kind of like master, or gold to like diamond, then yeah, I think Veigar can be a good option for you. Annie sits from the A tier. She's a pretty good pick at the moment. I honestly recommend her as an option. The kind of buffs and adjustments she received after they kind of like pushed her power away from Tibbers more towards her base kit really helped her, so I do have her in the A tier at the moment. Neferi really is quite niche at the moment, but so I honestly think as an AD pick she's quite good. Like her and Quinn are niche good A tier mid laners, and I recommend them if you play them. If you don't, then you probably play Yasuo. That's probably your AD mid option. You play one of the assassins. If not, then I mean there are other ways of getting like access to AD mid laners, but having one of these as an option within your pool is quite nice at the moment. Heimerdinger, also quite a niche mid laner. Like I'd have these. This is like my more niche mid lane section. I think he can be really oppressive though. But like I have a friend who plays a lot of Heimerdinger mid and is able to put out consistent, really good performances on the champion, even in like GM level play. So I think this pick is pretty slept on as an option. And if you enjoy the playstyle, definitely a pick which I would recommend trying at least. Xerath is my obviously recommended artillery mid laner. I really, really like him as an option. He's relatively consistent, great as a counter pick. Just the damage he can provide to a team composition in the right spots can be really powerful. I don't recommend blinding him. Like, he can definitely suffer in like assassin matchups, kind of akin to like your Aesol, for example. But in the right spots against champions which have a hard time assailing range, I think he can be a really, really good pick. Swain is a great option to pick when enemy team has a lack of damage or a like bad tools to kind of kill you. Then he's a really, really good pick. Generally, Swain probably sits as more like a B tier option, like if you just pick him in every spot, but counter pick Swain or maybe even like an S tier option, like a really, really solid like pick within like which you can have within your arsenal. Malzahar, he's like the third most popular mid laner at the moment. It's crazy kind of how this champion's landed. It's honestly so surprising because when you think of popular mid laners, you think of Ahri, you think of Yasuo, you think of Zed, you don't think of Malzahar a lot of the time, and it's just really interesting to see, like looking over some of these things within the data. And I mean, he's not bad. Like, he's a pretty solid option. Like, I honestly have him in the A tier. He does perform decently well in this elo bracket. Struggles a bit more in high elo brackets. Like, people will more consistently deny you from being able to get like your spikes within your kit, and they will deny you from just being able to freely push the wave. Like, they'll kill your like little minions which you spawn, or they will kind of drag the wave in a certain way, which makes it harder to just like freely get your dot and just like spread it on the wave. That can definitely be a bit more punishing, but he's fine. Like, I think he's a pretty good A tier pick, and if you want to play Malzahar mid lane, yeah, I think he can do you quite well. Victor, have him within the A tier still. He's like a low A tier option at this point. Like, Victor mid is fine. Like, it's a good champion if you want like a mid game mage with pretty good laning phase bullying capability, but he definitely can struggle into some of the mid lane pool, and he's not quite as strong as he was on like the kind of like updated release of the champion. So I do think he sits as more like a low A tier option now, but is also benefited by the fact that he's a good champion to have in your pool, kind of like Orianna. Both these champions I don't honestly have like as low A tier options, but they kind of like gain more out of the fact that they're great for competitive, and they're just great generic mages to have within your pool, and like they can to an extent mirror like a lot of the things that each one wants to do within a certain aspect, and that can be quite a nice like option to have within your arsenal for the most part. Yasuo sits from the A tier. I think Yasuo is probably my number 2 AD mid lane option at the moment. Number 1 is going to be Pantheon. And I mean, Renekton, I'm actually going to start including now. I think Renekton's a really, really good counter pick, and honestly, Renekton both top and mid is a really solid option. I'd also recommend trying out Stride Breaker Renekton, because you're obviously going to be playing into range more consistently when you are playing him mid lane. But overall, for champions at a pretty good spot at the moment, so definitely going to have him in the A tier alongside Yasuo as like one of my other AD options here. Akali is my recommended assassin. I really, really like Akali as a pick. The kind of like tool she provides combined with the I'd honestly say the execution threshold maybe isn't quite as high as some of the options, combined with like she's a bit more forgiving to play, just makes her a pretty rewarding pick to have. So definitely sits in the A tier. She's like my recommended one, but like my two best are Echo Diana still. Like, I really like these two as picks, and honestly, like if you think like consider Vladimir as an assassin, which I guess he kind of is, then yeah, actually, and Kennen. Like, there's some good options there for you at the moment. Wrapping up the A tier is Syndra and Hui. Like, I also recommend these picks within your pool. They are really, really solid options. And I'll see if you want something a bit more, maybe not niche. She's still very popular, but not as mainstream. Lux is a great option as well. Like, I think the top of the A tier, and honestly, I love Victor around this area because I'm a bit loose on like how, and I'll do this. I'll have these two together. Honestly, this top row in the A tier, great. Like, if you have a champion pool of that, you're doing well at the moment. Like, and then having like some of the S tier options as well, you've got a really well-rounded champion pool. Like, I would recommend this, and then like the picks which I have here, which we'll talk about now. Galio, great counter pick, great as like an anti-AEP assassin, or not even just like an anti-AP option. He can also still be fine into some of the AD picks mid. Like, obviously you don't want to pick him in that kind of situation, but like AP burst Galio is viable as well. Like, you can just play the standard tank, the Hollow Radiance into Riftmaker, and that traditionally is what you're going to go. But even like the AP build isn't bad at the moment. Definitely something worth considering. And I'll say I really like him as an option. He's pretty easy to execute. Definitely one of the kind of like foundations of the S tier. If you're looking for something pretty niche, I think Kennen is great in that regard. Obviously, whenever talking about Kennen mid, I always talk about Splinter, because Splinter was the person who kind of popularized it in Korea, hitting Challenger with like an insane win rate, I believe it was. So yeah, I mean, I think Kennen mid is really slept on as an option. Maybe he should actually be A tier, but I think as like a niche pick within mid lane, definitely probably finds himself as like an S tier option. Kale, I know people have started to catch on to Kale in both on primarily mid lane. Like, people now really know that Kale mid is quite obnoxious and quite strong as a champion. Obviously, you are forgoing some level of agency early into the game, but you can almost always inevitably scale. Like, that is just something Kale will get to, and a point which can be really hard for a lot of team compositions to deal with. The AP assassins, I still kind of like, yeah, Echoes and your Dianas, and honestly Vladimir, if you kind of consider him in that regard. Diana is a great laner. People really sleep on just how strong this champion's laning phase is. Echo has his ultimate is an incredible safety net, but his wave clear, his burst potential, his keystone options in both Electrocute and Hater Blades just give him a lot of tools within the mid lane. Vladimir, I really like him as an option. He can honestly like fight back against a lot of champions in lane, and he still scales incredibly well, so this pick really easy to recommend as an option in the current state of the game. And then Pantheon, I think as a counter pick is really powerful, like one of the best options in the mid lane, but just generally, he works in a lot of spots. His ultimate is an incredible global. He is point and click CC. He has great damage, great snowball potential. His agency is really high. His 2v2s, his team fighting, he's just good in a lot of ways. And where some of the limitations in like top lane come from, like he's not as good into the top lane pool. He's not as good in the long lane. He's not as good, or his ultimate's not going to be as good as an ability, are alleviated in the mid lane. And for that, I rate him as an S tier. Like, I think he's a great AD option to have at the moment. And honestly, if you play the top of the A tier, if you play the top of like a lot of the S tier options, I think you're on a great spot at the moment. So those are my recommendations in the mid lane. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.